Okay, we are proceeding with the terminologies that are used in disaster risk reduction. So I just do a recap of what we discussed last week. Last week we defined disaster, whereby I said that this is a serious disruption of the functioning of a community, whereby the community stops functioning the way it functions, and then there are some losses, but then these losses, they interact with conditions. Those conditions include conditions of exposure, conditions of vulnerability, and capacity. So a disaster is something that is serious. And also we discussed about small-scale disasters. We defined what a small-scale disaster is. We looked at large-scale disasters. We defined frequent and infrequent disasters. From there, we also looked at a slow onset disaster and a sudden onset disaster. We also discussed about disaster data, disaster loss database. We defined disaster risk. We defined disaster risk management. And we also defined emergency management, whereby I said that the term emergency is used interchangeably with disaster and hazardous event, but it's different from a disaster because an emergency is not something serious. Why? Because it doesn't cause a serious disturbance in the society. It doesn't stop the functioning of the society. And last thing that we discussed is disaster risk governance and disaster risk management. So this is what we discussed last week. For this week, we'll start with early warning system. Early warning system. What do you think early warning systems are? Yes, we are proceeding with the terminologies. Early warning systems. Yes.
Systems which okay, the government will put in place to inform the people before the disaster occurs.
Okay, there are systems that government put in place to inform the people about the occurrence of a disaster.
Yeah.
Okay, that's brilliant.
I think the contingency plans.
Okay. There are plans. Yeah, I can say there are plans, there are systems that warns people, okay? But then the best definition can be that they are interrelated and interconnected set of hazards monitoring. So it is a set, it is a system. But then this set of systems, they are interconnected and interrelated, okay? This set of hazard monitoring, they do risk assessment, communication, and preparedness activities that enable individuals, communities, government, businesses, and others to take timely action to reduce the risk in advance of a hazard event. So yes, you're all right, you're all correct that it is a system, but then it is a set of interconnected and interrelated systems of monitoring, risk management, okay, communication, preparedness activities, okay. These activities, these communications, these set of hazard warning systems, they help individuals, they help government, they help communities to prepare, okay? Sometimes to come up with activities that will reduce the harm that will come with a certain hazard. So that's early warning systems. I think we are together on the definition. It is a set, it is a system, yes, interconnected one. There are connections whereby these connections of systems, okay, they monitor the hazard, okay? They do risk assessment. Okay, this is a hazard. What are the risks that can come because of this hazard? So it is these systems that monitor the hazards of, they do risk assessment of a certain hazard, okay? They also try to communicate. As they're communicating, they let people prepare about a certain hazard that is going to come, or that hazard is there, but then people prepare for it. So not only people, we are talking of the government, they also prepare for a certain hazard. We are talking of communities, they also prepare for a certain hazard. So that's early warning systems. It's not a one system, it's a group of systems. Or we can, somebody talked of a group of people, okay? When we look at definition of the disaster governance, so that group of people, they form an interconnected system. That system monitors, that system do risk assessment. They do communicate to people about a certain hazard, not only to people, to government, to communities about a certain hazard, so that they should prepare, come up with activities to mitigate the impact of that hazardous event that is expected to occur or that is occurring. That's early warning system. So this early warning system is people-centered. It is a people-centered, or we can say that it is an end-to-end. Because it is an end-to-end, it has got elements. So we can call them an element of early warning system. Elements of early warning system. Are we together, my friend in a red hat? We are together. What did I say is the definition of early warning system?
Early warning system says a group of people which prepare as well as plan and be aware of the next disaster that are in this. It is a people-centered system.
About people, I was just giving an example. I said it's interconnected and interrelated sets of early warning hazards, events that assess, communicate, okay? So I was saying that system, there are a lot of things. If we say system, that means it's composed of a lot of things. I gave an example of disaster governance. It can be an example of a system, because in that system, there are a lot of things. Others do risk assessment, another set of system do communication, another set of system do preparedness, okay? Another set of system do monitoring, disaster. So a combination of that is what we're calling an early warning system. So it is people-centered, or it is an end-to-end. What do I mean when I'm saying people-centered? Okay, this early warning system, we're saying that there is preparedness, there is what? It is all this preparedness, all this monitoring, all these communications are done to people. So people are supposed to be aware, people are supposed to be communicated about a certain hazard that is going to occur. So we're calling it a people-centered system. And I also said that it has got elements. These are elements of early warning system. One of the elements is risk knowledge based. Risk knowledge based on the systematic collection of data. One element is risk knowledge based on the systematic collection of data and risk assessment. That's the first element. risk knowledge based on the systematic collection of data and risk assessment. Risk knowledge based on the systematic collection of data and risk assessment. That's the first element. The second element is detection, monitoring, analysis, detection, monitoring, analysis, and forecasting of the hazard and probable consequences. Detection, monitoring, analysis, and forecasting of the hazard and probable or possible consequences. That's the second element. The third element is dissemination and communication.
This what?
Dissemination and communication of timely accurate, accurate and actionable. Timely, accurate and actionable warnings and capabilities. It's dissemination and communication of timely, accurate and actionable warnings and associated information on likelihoods and impact. Number 3, dissemination, that's number 3.
Yes.
Dissemination and communication of timely, accurate and actionable warnings and associated information on likelihood and impact. Associated information on likelihood and impacts. So these are the elements, or we can say these are the characteristics of early warning system. The last element is preparedness and local capabilities. To respond to the warnings received. Preparedness and local capabilities to respond to the warnings received. So all these are the elements of early warning systems. There are 4 elements. If you know that you're providing early warning message to people, the first one is risk knowledge. Risk knowledge that is based on the systematic collection of data and risk assessment. You need to have a knowledge of a certain risk. But then, before you communicate to people, you need to collect data, okay? And do risk assessment. You need to have knowledge. Why? You don't have that knowledge. You need to know the risk knowledge. You need to have the risk knowledge. This knowledge will come in much as you have collected enough information, enough data about a certain risk assessment. So what do I mean when I'm talking of a risk assessment? Okay, I gave an example of you exposing yourself to mosquitoes. That's a risk. Okay, so you need to do a risk assessment. Okay, kusanje kwapangika mafloods kwambiri. What causes Nsanje to receive a lot of floods? Okay, so you need to go there, do an assessment. Okay, and I think you kusanje kuno ndikulowa shiri. Ndichivula ikabwera mazamadzaza ena. Then manyumba also ndiwo satani, ndiwo salimba, manyumba jamagwa. Okay, so those are some of the risks that put people into a certain hazard. So you do a risk assessment. You collect data. After collecting data, you have a certain knowledge. You go to, okay, and how they are at risk, I think they need to evacuate. So you go there and provide them information. You know what? You're more likely to suffer from the impact of floods because you are living in a lower hill, and at the same time, your houses are not that strong. You need to build your houses using strong materials if you don't want to evacuate. So you're providing them with knowledge. Or you tell them that even if this year, if there will be floods, you'll be the victims because your houses are not that strong. Okay? That means you have a certain knowledge about a certain risk. So you do risk assessment, you collect data for you to have that knowledge. So that's one of the elements of disaster risk assessment. And then the second element is detection, monitoring, analysis and forecasting of the hazard and risk and possible consequences. So after identifying a certain risk, you need to monitor, you need to analyze, you need to foresee or to forecast a hazard and possible consequences. So you've gone out there for an assessment, okay, a risk assessment. So you have identified that the houses are not that strong, or we can say that maybe there'll be drought. So after doing that, you need to analyze. You need to analyze your information. In analysis, you monitor the situation now. Okay, manyumba wando salimba tenti wonini kuti mvula ikabwera zikhala bwanji. Okay, so you have to forecast. Okay, you have to forecasting, foreseeing. Okay, imagining that maybe floods are occurring. So you have to put that in mind. You have to forecast, and then after forecasting, you need to come up with identify possible consequences of that hazard that you are forecasting. Okay, so you have to put them down, the forecasted possible consequences. Are we together?
Yes.
You have identified a risk, or maybe I'll give a life example. You can forecast yourself, you can imagine yourself graduating, okay? You can imagine yourself graduating and then getting a job. The same thing with disasters. After doing your assessment, risk assessment, you need to forecast the possible consequences that may come due to that risk. And how koza kupeze kuti ndi ma condition ya manyumba awa zakokoloka awa. So imagine that kuti okay, manyumba akakokoloka, what will be the consequences? Others will be injured, there will be death. Okay, those are the consequences. So all that you should include in early warning systems. Tell people the consequences of a certain risk after doing your assessment. Are we together?
Yes.
Do you have questions? Or maybe an experience whereby you did a certain risk assessment? something to add on early warning systems?
Something good. Like here in Malawi,
Okay.
we have been on the, is it last month that we were people from Madagascar? And
Okay.
soon in Malawi.
Okay. So what do you think could be the possible consequences of that hazard?
I think it's to build strong houses,
Do you think that would be possible? That,
Okay. Death of people, destruction of property.
so yes, so that can be some possible consequences that may come due to that hazard. So you need to prepare for it. Those are some part of the early warning systems. So you need to prepare. That's why I said that early warning system is people-centered. And the third element, we talked of dissemination and communication of timely, accurate, and actionable warnings associated with information on likelihoods and impact. So that's the third element. You need to communicate with people in a good time about a certain hazard, give them warnings about a certain hazard, and the impact of that hazard. So you have done your risk assessment, you have collected your data, you have forecasted the possible consequences that may come due to that hazard. You need to communicate to people. You need to warn them about that hazard. Tell them the consequences of that hazard. So that's the third element in risk assessment, early warning system. And the last one is preparedness. So you let people prepare for that mentioned hazard. So in preparation, maybe they can evacuate, maybe they can reconstruct their buildings. That's preparation. So all these are part of early warning system. That's why I said that it is a set of interconnected, interrelated activities to warn people, to warn government, to warn communities about a certain hazard. Tell them the consequences. That's early warning system. The second terminology is multiple hazard early warning. Multiple hazard early warning. Multiple hazard early warning. So this one is it's very obvious, okay? It's multiple hazard early warning. So we've defined an early warning system. What could be the definition of a multiple hazard early warning? Yes. You have no idea. That's right. Andrew, what do you think is the definition of a multiple hazard early warning after discussing early warning system? You have no idea. Okay, and you? No idea as well. Or you can give it a try.
Okay, let me just try.
Yeah, okay.
These are warnings that are put in place that multiple others will happen or occur in the same there'll be heavy rains, so that heavy rains will be occupied with floods. So that those floods will lead to also right
They will occur simultaneously, that is. So you're not far from the definition. Actually, I can say that's the definition. It will depend on how you explain it. The term of a multiple hazard early warning. Imagine a community moving from one hazard to another. After floods, drought. After drought, another hazard. So it is a system that detects multiple hazards. So you need to warn people about that hazard, that you're going to have this hazard, after this there will be this. So that's why we're calling it a multiple hazard early warning system. It covers a range of hazards and impacts. So you tell them the hazard and its impact. These systems, they are designed to be used in a multiple hazard context, where hazardous events may occur simultaneously. That's how we're calling them multiple hazards early warning. So it's also a system, but this system is designed to monitor hazards that occur simultaneously. And at the same time, we also tell them the impacts of that hazards. For those who have just joined, we are proceeding with terminologies used in disaster risk reduction. So, just a reminder, last week we discussed about disaster. We looked at disaster governance, disaster risk management, disaster risk. Looked at disaster risk reduction, small-scale disasters, large-scale disasters. We looked at frequent and infrequent disasters. And today we started with early warning systems. And I said that these early warning systems have got 4 elements. We just finished discussing these elements of early warning systems. One of the elements is risk knowledge, followed by detection, monitoring, and analysis. We also talked of dissemination and communication about a certain hazard and its impact. And lastly, we looked at preparedness of a certain hazard. So just find us discussing the second terminology that is for today, which is multiple hazard warning. Another terminology is economic loss. Economic loss. Economic loss is a total economic impact that consists of direct economic loss. It is an economic impact that consists of direct economic loss and indirect economic loss. Direct economic loss and indirect economic loss. So we are looking at economic loss, whereby in economic loss, we look at the total economic impact. This total economic impact consists of direct economic loss and indirect economic loss. So we'll start with direct economic loss. What is a direct economic loss? When talking of direct economic loss, we are looking at the monetary value of total, the monetary value of total or partial destruction of physical assets. We are looking at the monetary or partial destruction of physical assets available or existing in that affected area. So in terms of direct economic loss, it is equivalent to physical damage. So whenever you talk of direct economic loss, it is equivalent to physical damage. We are looking at monetary loss or physical assets, damage of physical assets. While in terms of indirect economic loss, we are looking at a decline in economic value. A decline in economic value that is added as a consequence of a direct economic loss. We are looking at a decline on economic value added as a consequence of direct economic loss or human or environmental impact. Added as consequence of direct economic loss or human and environmental impacts. So, in terms of direct economic loss, I'm saying that it is equivalent to the physical damage. So in terms of direct economic loss, we are looking at things like destruction of schools, hospitals, houses. We are talking of government buildings, okay? So if you calculate money that is lost, if maybe let's say this campus is a disaster, so you have to calculate the loss. There are billions that have been lost due to that event. That's a direct economic loss. Umakita kuona kuta ababa have made the loss. Uli ndi nyumba unaimanga munu wake umina 1 billion, 7 billion, but at once you have lost money directly due to a certain event. In terms of indirect, there are those consequences that come in because of a direct economic loss, a decline in value of a thing. My class is a class in modes. Of course, I was only in bed and I not how to as okay. On as a class in modes. You see, my customer has a water or my ship. So you make a loss because of a direct impact. But then, in terms of an indirect, it is a loss of value of something because of a direct hazard. That's the impacts of direct hazard. Are we together on the direct and indirect economic loss? Yes.
Does it imply, let's say, economy of a country or person? Okay, let's say, because I think people is floods.
Okay.
And they are, let's say, demand. That's a direct question,
That's a direct loss, yes.
Because of that, then they already. It's particular as a country, putting it in the environment,
yeah, that can be a direct loss.
Price
ya kwera komano people are suffering because they don't have enough food. Because the maize is scarce on the market, price is kukwera. So there are it can be a direct loss. It's a direct loss. Kukwera kwa chimangacho, it's the impact of a direct loss.
Yeah.
Okay? So that can be an indirect one.
Yeah.
So it will depend on how you explain it. The increase in price of maize, it's an indirect loss
Yeah.
that has come in because of that direct impact. But if you look at demand and supply, now we're going to business.
Yeah.
If you look at demand and supply, demand will be high, supply will be low, which will also have an impact on the economy of the nation.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a direct loss. Another definition is evacuation plan. Evacuation plan. So these are plans that establishes arrangements in advance. They are plans that establishes arrangements in advance to enable people, and if possible, they are plans that establishes arrangements in advance to enable people, and if possible, assets to move temporarily to safer places before, during, or after the occurrence of a hazardous event. So when talking of evacuation plans, they are plans that are established arrangements in advance to enable people, and if possible, assets to move temporarily to a safer place before, after, or during the occurrence of a hazardous event. So in evacuation plans, our main focus should be people. That's why in the definition we are saying that if possible, assets. Tikumvana. Ndisadzaone muno wina akuza nikuti you should go there and rescue people. Maybe there are floods. Utamangira fridge. Utamangira TV. Utamangira dish chicha. Okay? Your main focus should be people. When you're done rescuing people, that's when you can think of assets. These plans you can help them before the disaster, or after the disaster, or during the disaster. Yes.
So while you're going there and you find maybe person, I will go over that, I'm like that, but then the assets, manabwe na ragi ya ima basi sino longegi kama ayabasi na wakuma.
Okay, so I don't think that can happen. Kutu kape zote osi aulugakali. We have we call them the vulnerable people, the aged, the children, and the disabled. These people cannot evacuate faster. They say it's during the disaster. Disaster is occurring and you want to rescue. And even kusamba, they can't swim. Think of my baby, 1 to 3 years or 1 to 5. Those babies cannot swim. What about the disabled? Remember, you're doing social work. You help people. So your main focus should be our way. Even if you see kuti wina waka kupanga boti cha kupita musi akafika, ayanganena these vulnerable people. Sangale pheli pa community kukhalawo. When you rescue them, if possible, you can think of the assets. No matter how beautiful or expensive that asset may be, You have to consider people first during evacuation plans.
Oh, madam, in this case,
Mm.
nyumba ya yako ya
Mm.
kwanu kazi friji okazi yuboneka kuti inaphwanyika mwina ndi matabwani na
Mm. You have to think of their lives first. Find out anthu aja kuzokhala mwina yagwera kumali moyo. Rescue them. Apite kai kuchipatala, then you will come back to rescue my assets. Another definition is exposure. We are looking at terminologies or terminologies. Exposure. EXPO.
No, like you were saying another definition as the definition
Of evacuation. That was terminology. Exposure. So we're looking at, when we're talking of exposure, we're looking at the people, infrastructure, housing, production capacities, and other tangible human assets, located in hazard-prone areas. We are looking at people, infrastructure, housing, production capacities, and other tangible human assets located in hazard-prone areas. That's exposure. So you look at how these people are exposed to a certain hazard.
located where?
In a hazardous prone area. And another terminology is extensive risk. Extensive risk. So this is the risk of low severity, high frequency hazards event, the risk of low severity, high frequency hazardous events and disasters, high frequency hazardous events and disasters, mainly but not exclusively, associated with highly localized hazards. Risk of low severity, high frequency hazardous events and disasters, mainly but not exclusively associated with highly localized hazards. So that's the last terminology. Before you go, I have work for you. You have to go outside there and discuss and present for the remaining time. Firstly, you have to expand that definition, the last definition. Expand it in such a way that you have to tell me your own understanding of that definition, the last definition. And you have to think of uncertainty. You have ever heard of the word uncertainty and risk. Okay? So tell me whatever you think about uncertainty in disaster. What about risk? What is the risk? So you choose one person to present whatever you discuss. So
We're doing this as a whole.
yeah, just do it as a class. It's a class work. You can go outside or you can be here.
Let's go, guys. Some still be lazy. Yes, let's go.
So you should come at 9:30. 9:30. You have to explain your own understanding of the last definition.
Okay.
And you also have to define what uncertainty is and what risk is in disaster risk reduction, and what's your understanding of that definition in relation to disaster risk reduction. And that will be the end of our class
All right.
for today.
Good morning, class. My name is Owen Sumba. So I'll take you through firstly uncertainty. Uncertainty is an inability to foretell consequences or outcomes because there is a lack of knowledge or basis on which to make any predictions. So in short, you can't make a prediction out of an uncertainty because it can just happen. It's a consequence or it's an outcome of something which has happened. Secondly, I'll go to a risk. A risk and uncertainty, most of the time they will go together. But in this case, a risk, more specifically, a disaster risk is a potential disaster losses in terms of lives, health status, livelihoods, access, and service, which could occur to a particular community or a society over some specified future time period. So a risk, it also goes together with a disaster because when a risk happens, it's like a calamity whereby everything is collapsed. So a risk can lead to loss of lives, healthy status, and also livelihoods, and even assets, as I've already said. So I'll go to extensive risk. Before I go to my own understanding of extensive risk, I'll take you back to the one Madam gave us. Extensive risk refers to a risk associated with low severity, high frequency persistence events, mainly but not exclusively associated with highly localized hazards. These including floods, droughts, storms, fires, and even agriculture and water-related droughts. My own understanding of extensive risk is it's usually high where communities are exposed to and vulnerable to recurring localized floods, landslide storms, and trust. Extensive disaster risk is often exhibited by poverty, urbanization, and environmental degradation. Thank you. This is all I had for you this morning.
Right.
If you have any questions, madam, this is to you, madam.
No, I don't have any questions.
All right.
Maybe your friends might have some questions.
Do
Or
you guys,
maybe something for the class to discuss.
do you guys want to add on one thing? Samuel, I can see you using your phone. Did you get what I was saying? Samuel, Viber, you have your earphones. Do you get what I said? Okay, good.
Alright,
Thank you, madam.
so welcome. So this will be the end of our class today. Next class, we're going to look at uncertainties and risks. So that's for next class.